Welcome to the TSO Daily Dose. The TSO Daily Dose is our way of connecting with you in these challenging times. We'll be sharing concert footage from our recent performances, music that we've recorded with new visuals, interviews, player demonstrations, maybe even some cooking. This is our chance to reach out and connect with you. You can join us every morning at 8 a.m. for your TSO Daily Dose. Welcome back. Today I'm with another of our wonderful violists, Doug Coghill. Today's clip features Doug and our harpist, Meriel Owen, in a performance of Gabriel Fauré's Après, rêve. This is a particularly special performance as Doug is performing on a viola he has crafted himself. So Doug, tell me what possessed you to build a viola?
Well, if I can take you back to the 90s and the 2000s, my grandfather was also a viola player, and when he retired from metallurgy, decided he would become an instrument maker. So he taught himself. He read a book and decided he was going to make an instrument, and he churned out a violin, and it was pretty good, so he kept going, and in his lifetime he made 16 instruments altogether.
Are they being played by people?
Yep. Yeah, so what was really fantastic is as I was growing up, I never had to buy an instrument. I always played on one of his, which was, amazing, really.
Violas can be rather expensive, I imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, very expensive.
This instrument, is it based on the design of your grandfather?
No, so this is a design he never did. So when I was in high school, said I'd really like to make instruments. So he took me under his wing, and we sort of started very slowly, but then eventually, by the time I got to year 12, that was my woodwork subject. I made a viola, and it was based on Arthur Edward Smith, who was a very famous Australian maker.
Okay.
Of sort of the early 20th century through to the mid 20th century. So that viola sits at home at the moment. That was my first. This one is my third instrument. So this one, to answer your question, is based on a model which is the same as mine, the one I play at work, by Arthur Richardson is the maker. So he and a famous viola player, Lionel Tertis, worked together and developed this particular shape. So it's known as the Tertis model. The unique features, I suppose, or the identifying features, is a particularly wide instrument across the lower bouts, middle bouts, and also in terms of the depth, it's very chunky as well.
So what is about?
Well, yeah, the term bout, I don't really know what it is,
okay.
But they call this the lower bout, and the upper bout, and the mid bout. So it's just referring to different parts.
So you bought the plans online?
No, I didn't. So thankfully, my grandfather had many plans. He did a lot of research before he started making certain instruments, and he had the plans for this one sitting around, which was great. It meant I didn't have to take mine apart to then copy it, because it's an incredibly intricate thing to copy an instrument. There's so many
different parts to it.
Many different parts. And I mean, for instance, the thickness of the top and the back are crucial, and you won't necessarily copy that exactly from a plan, but you will be pretty close, and you want a general guide as to what you're doing.
What is the sort of sound profile that comes from a new instrument? There's a lot of discussion about sort of the older the instrument, the better. From your perspective, what is your handmade instrument like to play?
Well, it's always an interesting question whether an old instrument is better than a new one, and people will debate about it forever till the cows come home. I have played quite a few old instruments, including Stradivarius and Amati, and a few other instruments that I've been, lucky to. Sometimes when performers come through TSO, they say, they let you have a little go, and it's a fantastic thing for an instrument maker, or an amateur instrument maker.
An amateur luthier.
An amateur, that's right. To have a chance to listen to what it's like to play those. I mean, every viola is different. You do notice that at the beginning, the instrument is very fresh, and it's very harsh often in the sound a bit.
So as it gets older, it gets mellower, is that?
Perhaps, yeah, it can do. I mean, things can change, and they do change a lot in the first weeks and months, and then I think that change slows down. I mean, a lot of this is speculation, really. There's no real scientific evidence, I don't think, that sort of supports the argument.
Does the wood the quality of the wood play a difference? And is this Tasmanian wood or is this?
So yes, the quality of the wood is very important. You want wood that resonates very well. A lot of makers will pick up a block of wood and they'll tap it and listen to how well it rings when they tap it. You want to hear that it resonates well. This instrument is not made from Tasmanian timbers, although my first viola that I made with my grandfather was purely Tasmanian woods. This one is based on traditional European woods. So we've got the back is European maple and the sides, also the neck. The front is European spruce. The fingerboard, though, however, is not European, I believe. It's probably African. It's ebony.
Yep.
Is the timber. So some people think it's a painted piece of wood, but it's actually that's the colour of the.
That's the actual colour
of the wood. Yeah.
I've heard that ebony is quite difficult to work with.
It's very dense. Yes. You need very sharp tools to cut through the wood. Yeah, it's not impossible to work with, but just takes a bit longer than other wood.
You've got 2 violas.
Yeah, so
currently in the works.
That's right. So at the moment we have a little bit of extra time. So I've got a couple of plans in case we're forced to stay at home, and obviously I'll be practicing at home and trying to keep my playing up and push myself in that way. But I've got 2 violas that I would like to make. One is to copy this one again, the Tertis model, but in Tasmanian timbers.
All right.
So that would be a Kimberley pine.
That would be fascinating to compare the two.
It would be interesting. I mean, you can never really compare 2 instruments because 2 pieces of wood, even if you made it from the same plank of wood, it's always going to be different, slightly different thicknesses. I mean, even the piece of wood is different at either end. It's not identical. So, but it still will be interesting from that point of view to try it. So there's that one to make, and then also our principal viola, Stephanie Farron's, has a particular instrument which I'm interested in. So hers was made by Ragnar Hahn. I'm not sure if I'm saying that correctly. A German man, and he's based in Berlin, I believe. Stephanie has spent quite a bit of time in Berlin, as you'd know. So it's a slightly smaller instrument. It's based on Andre Guarneri viola from 1676, I believe. So it's quite old. So hers is a modern, it's only a few years old. It's a modern take on that instrument. So I've got, also, thank you to Grandpa, was going through his books the other day and I was trying to find these plans for this Andre Guarneri viola because it's not on the internet anymore. Okay. The Strad posters, they stopped printing it. Okay. And I really need it to, just to get those finer things, details like thickness of the timber and what did he do, what were his identifying features. And luckily, the other day I would have to be going through Grandpa's old his research.
His catalogue.
Yeah, which people don't do anymore. And now you just go on the internet and click and you remember that it's there and you can get it again. Yeah. So but he catalogued everything and I found this poster in the middle of flicking through it all, which was fantastic.
Of the Guarneri?
Of the Guarneri, the Andre Guarneri.
Steph's viola is based on.
Correct. Wow. Yeah, so I've got those 2 different instruments, very different in shape. Also volume. In terms of the volume of the instrument, the air inside, this one is quite big. It's very chunky in basically every direction, except for playability. They've kept it quite kind of narrow around the top, so you can get around the instrument, which is great. So this is the kind of viola that I grew up hearing. Like my granddad played on an Arthur Edward Smith, and then later he played on a copy of a Smith that he made. Okay. So I grew up with sort of cello-y sounding violas, if that makes any sense to anybody. As opposed to
I'm learning more and more about viola as time goes on. Yeah. But that seems to make some sense.
Yeah. Just pretend it does.
Yeah.
The Guarneri, Andre Guarneri is slightly smaller, but yet, Stephanie's playing is fantastic. And she gets an incredible tone out of the thing. But it's a smaller viola, so I'd be interested to see what it's like and how that turns out.
Are you making the Guarneri copy with traditional woods or Tasmanian woods?
Well, so that's the other problem at the moment. Our dollar is somewhat low, and I would normally purchase my timber through an American company. Okay. And I'm reluctant to at the moment because it would be very expensive to place a proper order. So I'm making do with what I've got. It's interesting that you should ask that because that particular viola that was made in 1676 by Andre Guarneri had a fairly basic back. So you can see on this viola that the timber has what's called flaming or figuring. So it looks like stripes, a bit like a tiger or something, again on the sides as well. So the timber, as the tree grows, it forms these patterns. Sometimes it doesn't.
Okay.
Some people believe that you shouldn't have too much figuring for a viola, and that it should be. I mean, everyone has their beliefs, and that's fine. But this particular viola was very plain on the back, and I've got a piece of wood which is also quite plain, also a piece of maple. So I'm going to use that piece as sort of a bit of a nod to Andre Guarneri and his perhaps limited supply at times that he may have faced.
He may do.
Yeah, so also at this time I'm faced with limited supply like he was in 1676.
It's quite authentic.
So in 2020, I'm going to stick with a pretty basic piece of wood which is a bit counterintuitive, perhaps.
Would you ever see yourself entering the luthier business on a more full-time basis?
Look, I don't think while I'm working with TSO. I mean, I love playing with the orchestra, and I need to practice. So I
imagine it takes a lot of time to build one of
Yeah,
these.
it does. I mean, it takes me a lot longer than it would a professional maker because they're doing that full time. And it would take probably 2 months from beginning to end of varnishing and everything to push out a viola or a violin or cello.
How long did it take you to build this?
I think so I finished this in 2019. Yeah, I made it over 2019. I don't know how many months.
But within the space of a year?
Yeah, within the space of a year. So, I mean, again, if I was...
You have to wait for the wood to settle?
Not so much. The wood is very dry. So you purchase timber which has been, not necessarily aged, but been dried for 20, 30 years, perhaps.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're kiln dried, it'd be a bit quicker. But the wood is very stable then. When the wood is green, that's the term if it's still full of sap and water and everything. If you make an instrument then and you carved the arching and everything, you would probably find that it would warp.
Okay.
But so we want really pretty dry wood to make it quite stable. That makes a big difference.
Fantastic. How was it preparing the Fauré on this viola, on this instrument?
Well, that's an interesting question, Mitch. I don't normally play this viola. I have played it at work a couple of times, but I'm not, even though it was last year, it was finished, I'm not really that familiar with how it feels, how it responds. Every instrument, even though it's theoretically a copy of the viola I play, it is different, really quite different in a lot of ways. So to answer your question, it was quite different, and I had to get used to it and used to how it wants to be produced, the tone wants to be produced. So So this viola I find has quite a broad, quite open sort of sound, which I like, and I think it still has a focus, which is really good. So I felt like when I was going to prepare a piece for this daily dose, I wanted to play something that featured its melancholy and its sort of the depths and sort of sorrow of the viola, which the viola kind of has a lot of those qualities, which is nice. So I chose the Fauré, and then also I felt like this viola also having again that kind of depth and breadth and however you want to describe the sound. I thought it would be really fantastic with harp. So this piece is normally played with piano, but I thought Meriel plays so fantastically, so why not put the two together, and I think it would work really well. I
heard you rehearsing yesterday, and they blend beautifully together. That's a great lead-in to today's clip of Doug and Meriel performing Gabriel Fauré's Après, rêve.